One of the things that we work with in recovery is what we call splits. And splits are, let's think about it as part of the psyche or parts of the self that are split off from each other and not communicating well with each other. So a common example would be my cognitive capacity, my ability to think and reason, and my emotional capacity. And those two capacities should grow together relatively close. A split is when one area of the self or of the mind, structure of the mind, continues to grow and another one gets stuck. And so let's say I continue to grow cognitively, I go to college, I'm able to reason and think well, but for some reason, usually some kind of trauma or traumatic dynamic or drug use, I don't grow in the area of emotion regulation. So there you have somebody who is very reasonable and under stress is 7 years old. Throws tantrums, right? And we know people like that who we could say the tail wags the dog. You know, they're really reasonable and they're smart, sophisticated and mature when it comes to their thought, but emotionally, you know, they're tyrants, right? That's a split between emotion regulation and cognitive capacity. So one of the major splits that we deal with is the split between self and other. Because I have to negotiate and navigate the interpersonal sphere, and I have to constantly understand where I stop and start, both in my field of existence and in my boundaries. In fact, you could equate mental health almost directly with how good my boundaries are. Really good boundaries basically equals really good mental health, right? So an example of bad mental health, meaning mental health that's gone chaotic or awry, is psychosis. Somebody who is clinically detached from reality, somebody who's psychotic. If you've ever, walked the streets of San Francisco or, downtown LA and you see a psychotic person, one of the things you'll see is they have terrible boundaries. They'll cuss you out right in your face. And, you're like, oh, wait a minute here. You know what I mean? So mental health and boundaries are pretty much equated. And one of the areas that people need a lot of work when they come into recovery is figuring out how to navigate and negotiate self and other. It's easy to pull back into myself. It's easy to accommodate into the other, figuring out how to navigate that in the complexity of our lives. For some people, that's really easy, with friends and family. Actually, I don't think for anybody it's easy, but they've adapted to it and know how to do it, but they don't know how to do it in multiple roles. It's a certain level of development. How can I be a husband, a father, a worker, an employer, an employee, a friend? These are different roles with different boundaries and different demands, different competing claims. And part of mental health and maturity and part of recovery is becoming attuned to those fields and figuring out my general boundaries and then my specific boundaries in each moment, in each role. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's why recovery is so hard. You're not just treating your drug addiction, you're also figuring out how to live well. And living well means figuring out how to navigate what it means to be a self and what it means to care about the other.